We welcome you to the Garden Podcast, sponsored by the Garden Worship Experience at San Diego United Methodist Church in Encinitas, California. My name is Mark Maddix, and I serve as the lead pastor here. And we welcome you to the Garden Podcast. The goal of the podcast is to think critically, love authentically, and serve compassionately. And today we welcome to the Garden Podcast Ashley Boggan. It's good to have you with us, Ashley.
Thank you.
Ashley is a scholar, a laywoman who serves the General Secretary of the General Commission on Archives and History for the United Methodist Church. She is an author of several books, nonetheless, American Methodism and Women's Rights in 2020, and Entangled, A History of American Methodists, Politics and Sexuality in 2018. And her most recent book, which we're going to be talking about today, Wesleyan Vile-tality, Reclaiming the Heart of Methodist Identity, which was just released this year in 2025. So again, Ashley, it's great to have you with us, and thanks for joining us on the Garden Podcast.
Thank you for the invitation.
So your book is kind of built around Wesley's phrase, "I submit to be more vile," which is very interesting language, of course, in our day, but it refers to his decision to preach outside the traditional church setting. And the act of being considered vile was really kind of being against the social norms and church laws, basically. So maybe just to get us started, maybe elaborate a little more in detail about this understanding of vile and how it's being used in the book.
Yeah. So 1739, John Wesley gets invited down to Bristol, England, by one of his kind of clergy colleagues, a man named George Whitefield. George Whitefield had been in Bristol for a little bit preaching. And John Wesley was actually his fourth or fifth choice of person to come help him, which is always kind of humorous if you ask me. Charles Wesley was his first choice, but John was his fourth or fifth. So he writes a letter to John, and John agrees to go down to Bristol and kind of see what's going on there. So he arrives around March 31st, 1739, and I think he was fully expecting George Whitefield to not be preaching in the fields. I think he was expecting him to be preaching in a church. But he sees Whitefield preaching in the fields and is just astounded by the effect that it's having on those who were gathered.
Mm-hmm.
And so Wesley goes back and he does, what he does best, which is often journaling and thinking, and he reaches out to a couple of his friends, and he feels like that God is kind of calling him to go preach in the fields. And so on April 2nd, he does so. And famously writes in his journal at 4 p.m., "I submitted to be more vile and proclaimed in the highways the glad tidings of salvation, speaking from a little eminence in a field adjoining to the city." And I'm not the only person who's picked up on that phrase, "submitted to be more vile." One of my favorite things to do is to kind of read old Methodist history books and see people kind of also pick up on it, because it's a catchy turn of phrase. And for me, it's kind of the true beginning of Methodism is in that moment, because that is when John Wesley kind of figures out his call. Up until then, he was a fellow at Lincoln College, which kind of means he was a tutor. He had already gone to Georgia and had the big, missionary fail in Georgia. And he was really trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. And so submitting means or implies that if this is something he did not want to do, then that's reiterated by his use of the word vile. So he's listening to God's call on his life and doing something that he knows is against church law, that is against all standards of society, and even against his own personal preferences. So John Wesley was very much today we might call him like a neat freak. Like he was obsessed with personal hygiene, preferred prim and proper things to dirty and grimy things. And when he goes out to the fields, he's preaching to coal miners in the fields. And
Yeah.
these are the fields of Bristol. So if you've ever been to Bristol, you can kind of see that it's a town that has a port in it. And so imagine like the combination of coal mines and like the mud from ports and like the industry
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
smell from ports. So this was not a prim and proper place to go.
Right. Right.
But he feels a calling to go, and so he does.
Yeah. 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 I know some scholars have argued that, certainly has a sense of call to do this, but it was actually Whitefield that kind of drug him into this, right? He really didn't want to do it, just like he didn't want to do other forms of anything against kind of the Church of England. And so, it was really Whitefield and maybe God's call that kind of drug him into this kind of ministry. And I agree with you that really kind of launched what we know now to be the Methodist movement because of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and the biggest difference between Whitefield and Wesley was, I mean, Whitefield was an allegedly an astounding preacher.
Yeah.
He drew crowds of tens of thousands of people, allegedly.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and people were really drawn to him because he was cross-eyed. And back then they weren't sure as to what the cause of that was.
Hmm.
And so any person with kind of a bodily difference was seen as someone who was blessed by God. And so you combine kind of like his charismatic preaching with this bodily difference, and people were just, they were drawn to him.
Yeah.
And so while Whitefield was a good preacher, he did have the habit of kind of running around and preaching and then leaving.
Yeah.
And where John Wesley comes in is he comes in and he kind of takes over. His first few sermons are not necessarily received well, but he keeps at it, and he realizes that, Whitefield had brought all of these people, or kind of awakened these people to God, but they didn't have any sense of community or any way to sustain their faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where John Wesley begins kind of the small groups, the bands, the classes, and things like that, in order to keep people accountable to themselves, each other, and to God.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and so in thinking about kind of this idea of vitality, um, what might be some experiences in your own life where you've seen this modeled for you, that's helped formed your own understanding of being vile in some ways? Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. So both of my parents were ordained clergy, kind of serving in the Arkansas Annual Conference. And my mom, along with a couple of her parishioners, began beer and hymns. And,
Yeah.
with in Arkansas, in the United Methodist Church, right? The idea of incorporating anything that might be church-like with, alcoholic substances
Right, right.
might be seen by some as vile. But she felt that was a way to connect with people where they were,
Hmm.
and recognized as well that the church had done a lot of harm to people,
Hmm.
that the church wasn't necessarily interested in changing or adjusting to meet the needs or the interests of younger generations. And
Hmm.
so she and a couple other musicians went to some local breweries in Bentonville, Arkansas, and asked, like on a Monday night, right? When y'all really aren't busy, when we come in and sing some Methodist hymns, and people will drink beer, we'll bring in food, and we'll, kind of take up a tithe if it seems like that is where the Spirit is leading them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't remember when that started. It's probably been maybe a decade. But that Beer and Hymns is now a separate nonprofit that still runs in Arkansas. They meet once a month, and they've raised like over $250,000 for
Wow.
local
Yeah.
charities. And so that is probably one of those modern iterations of Like people aren't coming inside the church.
Right.
Where are they? Where do we need to take the love of God? And in what way can we do it that might be against our own sense of decorum? Like my mother hated beer. She was always a wine person, but hated beer.
Yeah.
And so how do you, even kind of go against things that you think are prim and proper
Hmm.
in order to reach new people?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great example. And it's great to hear that it's still going. And
It is.
it's a legacy now. So that's really good. Well, you certainly, you talk about this example of Wesley. Were there other examples when because I'll get to this later in the podcast, but you're really kind of calling now Methodists to live out this vitality in their own lives, and kind of a critique that we've kind of lost sight of that. And so, can you maybe just talk a little bit about other maybe examples that Wesley gave, other than just field preaching is one, obviously, but what might be others?
So I think in Wesley's day, his stance against slavery would
Mhm.
have been considered one of this one of these stances that was perceived by particularly those in power as vile.
Yeah.
So Bristol just happened to be the main port for the Atlantic slave trade for England.
Mhm.
And so it's in that town, right, where he first does his field preaching. And he's first exposed to the institution of slavery in Georgia on
Mhm.
his missionary trip over there. And when he comes back to England, he befriends a few Quakers. I think one is Anthony Benezet and William Wilberforce, who is a member of Parliament. And they, William Wilberforce actually becomes a Methodist, but they all kind of are in dialogue about the institution of slavery, the morality. They're kind of in this Enlightenment world, so they're debating things like liberty and freedom and
Mhm. Yeah.
citizenship and all this stuff. So I think his willingness to openly critique um, slavery, kind of at the height of the Atlantic slave trade, right? He writes, well, he largely republishes Anthony Benezet's thoughts upon slavery, but kind of adds some of his own commentary throughout in 1780, no, in 1774. And for me, that really is one of those other examples of being vile by calling it out. And if you read that tract, I mean, it's hard to know what is Wesley's word and what's Benezet's, but
Right.
he's naming kind of the generational trauma that's going to come from the institution. He's naming the generational discrepancies and inequities that will probably result. And so in that way, you can really see
Hmm.
that he's pushing established systems to be better by going against them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. And certainly in the book you talk about that this is not unique to Wesley. Certainly it's deeply rooted in the life of Jesus. And so I know there's plenty of examples we can think about in scripture about that, but maybe just share with us a couple that certainly reflect Jesus kind of in this kind of being vile.
Yeah, I know. And that was one of my one of the fun parts of writing the book was getting to call Jesus vile. And then like acknowledging that some people are gonna be like, I am not reading any
No,
further.
that'd be a great sermon title. I'm gonna steal that. Yeah. Jesus is vile.
I mean, right, like when you think of any of the parables that Jesus told, you can get a sense of kind of that vile-tality.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when you think that, God came in the form of a human and a lowly human born through a virgin young girl who's raised kind of as a carpenter's son, like
Yeah.
all of these types of things in and of themselves are already challenging the institutions. Um, and I think I say in the book that, despite kind of Jesus's preferential option for the poor,
Yeah.
his reaching those outcasts, his willingness to, kind of overcome death by bringing like Lazarus back to life, and then himself over, he had the vile audacity
Yeah.
to to be resurrected. So for me, there's really it'd probably be easier to illustrate the things that Jesus, or not easier, but less numerous, is
Yeah,
illustrate the things that Jesus did that might have been like complying with the system, because
right.
you don't really see a lot of compliance with the institutions that were the Roman Empire when you look at the life of Jesus.
Hmm. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's always helpful, we look at people like Wesley, which we should, but we also recognize that Wesley was deeply rooted in Scripture and certainly followed the life of Jesus, and as you said earlier, felt this sense of call to do these things, and he spent his life, caring for the poor and the oppressed, the marginalized, and it's a good example for us about the ways in which we live out this kind of vile life in some ways. So you also talk a little bit in the book about, certainly there's all kinds of positive things that talk about the Wesleyan movement. And we, as Wesleyans, United Methodists, we tend to want to focus on all the good things about that. But there's also could be some negative aspects of the movement that may call us to a sense of accountability and action even now. So maybe I know you hint at a few of these and talk about a few of these in your book, but maybe share with us a couple of those examples.
Yeah. So, sticking with the example of being against the institution of slavery, when John Wesley was adamantly opposed to slavery his entire life. And in fact, the last letter that he ever writes that we know about was to William Wilberforce, asking him to carry on his anti-slavery legacy and kind of the fight to end the institution. When the Methodist Episcopal Church is formed in 1784, one of the big arguments this book makes is that when we went from being a movement inside of an established church to being an established church ourselves or an institution, we lost that sense of vile-tality. Because instead of being the ones who were, pushing rules or standards, we became the one making rules. And, United Methodists, especially nowadays, we love making rules. But as we began to focus on kind of an institutional identity, respectability, membership growth, growth in power, political allyships or allyships with movers and shakers outside of the Methodist tradition. With all of these things, we gave up a little bit of our sense of vileness, because no one's going to support you or join your movement if you're actively being told by persons in power that you should not exist, or that your existence is a threat, and so we'll put you in jail. So let me back up a little bit. Early Methodists in America around the 1780s, 1790s, early 1800s did have some of that sense of vileness still, and that they were kind of rabble-rousers. They, early on, women were exhorters in America, Methodism, and early on, they did try to continue the anti-slavery stance. The anti-slavery stance makes it about 6 months after the Methodist Episcopal Church is formed, because Methodism was existing in spaces where it was actually illegal to manumit your slaves.
Right.
And so Methodism had to make a choice in that moment of, do we encourage people to still, manumit or release their enslaved persons, or do we recognize that in some places they cannot do that without threatening their own lives and livelihood?
Yeah.
And if you ask me, looking back, hindsight's 2020, but looking back, we made the wrong choice. I think we began a 3-decade long watering down of our stance against slavery, to where it essentially became, it's up to the annual conference. And in that, we lost the ability as an institution to be a united front that actively fought against the emerging government, saying, no, this is wrong.
Right.
And instead, we focused on, spreading Methodism throughout the South, to the point to where we had separate catechisms for enslaved persons.
Right.
There's even a
Yep.
separate book of discipline printed for South Carolina that didn't mention slavery at all.
Hmm.
So all of those kind of ways highlight the way that kind of institutionally the Methodist tradition, particularly in America, lost its sense of Wesleyan Vile-tality as it grew,
Yeah.
as it chose to be more quote unquote respectable.
Yeah. Yeah. And a little bit similar to that is even women in ministry, right? I mean, early on, women
Mm-hmm.
were engaged in ministry. There was a period of time where it's like, I'm not so sure about that. And then later, of course, what was in the 40s or so, I can't remember exact date, but finally women were ordained and given areas of leadership. So a very similar example.
Yeah, 1956.
Okay, all right. Wrong decade. That was close.
No, you were.
Yeah,
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 I mean, yeah, the same story exactly. It exists with women. I mean, that's another way that John Wesley was vile, is that
yeah.
and that's a place where he actually did struggle. He was raised by a very strong woman who I would argue was a better preacher and theologian than
Uh-huh.
her husband Samuel, but and potentially even better than John or Charles. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
I think that's fair. Yeah,
um, but John really kind of struggled with, do not do women preach, but should women be allowed to preach in an official capacity within the church?
right.
And it's by the 1750s that he has seen enough women do have a call to
Mhm.
preach and follow through with it despite whatever may come to them, and truly bring people to Christ.
Right.
And so he
Right.
adjusted his beliefs. He was like, I've seen it.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, this is happening. We can't deny this.
yeah.
And so again, some of that carries over to the Methodist Episcopal Church. But in Methodist Episcopal Church, women were kind of resigned to being class leaders and exhorters.
Hmm. Right.
And you do have, like, one of the pieces of the book is the kind of individuals who uh, poke up or peek up every now and then and kind of reclaim that Wesleyan vileness
Yeah.
and work to challenge the institution. So, women like Jarena Lee within the African Methodist Episcopal Church, women like Frances Willard and Anna Howard Shaw, all of these remarkable women began to reclaim this sense of, this isn't right and this isn't what it means to be Methodist, and how do we continue to push the boundaries of our own institution that we've created so that it can push the boundaries of this nation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that kind of moves us forward, based on that history, moves us forward to kind of where we are now. And you certainly talk about in the book again that as the institution has become kind of more respectable, has power and influence, certainly there's still this kind of denial of these areas of vile that you speak about: racism, sexism, and other aspects of social justice. Certainly, the LGBTQIA plus issue, which is, it finally came to some decisions a year ago at General Conference. But maybe talk about some of those. What does it mean to be kind of a faithful witness and engage in vile even now?
Ooh.
I know that's
Um,
a lot there. So,
no, I mean, it's just one of those things that, I mean, God, and within the context of the United States today, you know, choose any aspect of life right
yes.
now,
Yeah.
it feels like. Um, so right now, I would say that one of the places kind of within the United Methodist Church that we need to do this work is really um, reframing the what I see, what I assume um, to be a damaging and dangerous narrative of church decline. I think we focus so much today on how many butts are in our pews on Sunday morning, and that is not the thing we should be focusing on. Instead, right? Like and that is what John Wesley did, right? He did Methodist churches, Methodist preaching
Right.
houses, churches. We're not
Right.
open on Sunday mornings, right? Methodism was the thing that you did as kind of your extracurricular spiritual activity throughout the week. And so how do we reclaim some of that and stop worrying about how many people show up on Sunday morning and instead say, where in my local community can I bring God's love and make a difference for those who are being most outcast and silenced, intentionally silenced?
Mm-hmm.
And, from immigration to voting rights to Black Lives Matter to protecting our queer and trans siblings in Christ. Like, I mean, choose any of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And depending on your local context, see how you can be a United Methodist and show up for those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you know my story a bit, but I was actually I served in the Church of the Nazarene for 35 years, and 25 of those in the academy until recently, just 2 years ago, kind of went through a transition, and certainly came to this church. It was appointed by the bishop and began the process of becoming United Methodist. So just to say that my own experience certainly deeply rooted in the Wesleyan tradition, but also very much aware that uh, I guess because of the more focus on justice and affirming issues, which I strongly support, and that's why I made the transition, was that I'm always puzzled that coming from that tradition where it's more conservative and people tend to show up, and then being in a part of a Methodist tradition that's more inclusive and more open, and it seems that it's harder to get people to explore their faith in that environment. So it's an interesting dichotomy to kind of wrestle with a bit, and some of that is, there's reactionary too, because you are more open and you are more progressive on these issues, but especially thinking of young adults, because young adults typically are just more open around all these things. It still puzzles me why. I guess I would think that they would want to come and participate and like you said, not necessarily come to church on Sunday, but be in avenues or safe spaces where you can engage in these conversations. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I actually do. So
Good, good, good.
I don't want to plug another book, but
No, you can plug another book. It's good.
so this fall, hopefully August or September, there's kind of a part 2 to this book coming out. And so it came out of let me back up a little bit. So in 2022, I went on the Wesleyan pilgrimage, and I talk about it in this book.
Yeah.
And it was kind of sitting in the new room in Bristol where all of these puzzle pieces kind of came together. And sitting next to me was a fellow pilgrim, Reverend Dr. Chris Heckert. And he and I formed a friendship that was really kind of around this shared Bristol experience. And he's a pastor in southern New Jersey. And we kept going back and forth about okay, so what happened in Bristol to kind of make Methodism grow? Like, what did Wesley actually do? And as he was getting his doctorate in ministry, the project that he put together, he was explaining it to me one day, and I looked at him. I was like, "You've kind of created what might be considered a practical quadrilateral." Right? Like Albert Outler's famous Wesleyan quadrilateral is how we approach Scripture. Right? It's very theological, but when you look at Wesley's life, right, like he was all about practical theology, not necessarily
Right. That's right.
Yeah, just theology. And so we kind of took a page out of Outler's book and looked across Wesley's life and came up with this method of Methodism that we might be able to replicate today. So it's really kind of the practical aspect following up to this book, co-written with a pastor who's done these things. Is doing these things. But one of the places and spaces that I've seen it, and so essentially the practical quadrilateral in and of itself is field preaching or some sort of content that draws people together or goes where people are. forming micro communities, right? For Wesley, that was the bands or the classes and societies.
Yeah.
Getting those communities active in social justice, and then allowing that group to kind of dissolve if it needs to in order to activate other groups or encouraging them to go out and be leaders on their own. And that's what Wesley did his entire ministry. And that's how the early Methodist Episcopal Church also grew so rapidly. And one of the points that Chris makes in that book, that'll be out this fall, is that a lot of more theologically conservative, particularly non-denominational churches are doing that today, but they're doing it with a theology that's toxic.
Yeah.
And so how do we, as United Methodists, kind of reclaim the method of Methodism that they're using?
Yeah.
But do it with, a more healing, loving theology behind it. And so that comes out, like I said, August, September. It's called Calling on Fire. And it really is the practical how to
Good. You'll have to do another
how to
interview
be
then.
vile, or how to kind of implement this call back to this re-engagement with Wesley.
Oh, good. I'll look forward to seeing that. That sounds good. So, in thinking about your book, why do you think this focus on being vile is so important, particularly right now in the United Methodist Church? And how are you hoping the book will kind of move the needle forward a bit when it comes to being more vile?
Well, right now, I think we have over the almost 241 years of being an institution that's changed, that's grown, that's shifted and renamed itself. I really think we've gotten to a place to where we've entangled ourselves with a polity to where there's no room to breathe. There's not a lot of room to experiment. I could give you umpteen examples since taking on the general secretary's role as to great ideas that have come up, but you can't get them implemented without going through either 4 different boards or 8 different committees or waiting for general conference, which sometimes doesn't happen for 8 years.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, I think this being vile in today's context is a willingness to kind of experiment and to do so without waiting for committee approval. Maybe give your bishop a heads up.
Right.
If you want to. But yeah, I think getting out there and just trying stuff and knowing that it might fail and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's another thing, right? John Wesley was not successful at everything, especially preaching. Like people didn't like him at first.
Right. Yeah.
And so how do we get beyond, maybe not only get beyond the way that we typically understand church nowadays of just being, Sunday morning, Sunday school, worship, gone, maybe a youth group meeting throughout the week. But how do we actually kind of not only mess with or vile the idea of church, but also do so in a way that is pushing the boundaries of our own system, because we have gotten so slow, I'll say it that way. I think that's another thing that John Wesley did, is because he was a movement inside of an institution, he was responsive. If he saw a need, he figured out a way to meet that need.
Yeah.
And he did so on his own. And he did so by employing laypersons and tasking them and saying, you've never been given any responsibility because nobody assumes that you can do anything because, you're of a lowlier class, you're uneducated, you're a woman. But here, I'm going to give you this task.
Right.
And I believe that you can do this.
Yeah.
Go and do it. So how do we kind of reclaim some of that work of being responsive, of empowering people whom others say don't have the responsibility to do something, and really rethink this idea of doing church outside of our own committee structures.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I hope that takes place. So I hope there's opportunities. I mean, the Spirit is always doing new things among us. And so what might the Spirit be teaching us or empowering us to do in ways that we have not yet seen, right? I mean, that's That's one of the great things about when you look back even at the Wesley movement or other movements, things happen that were not foreseeable. And so God can hopefully give us a new sense of imagination about what might be ahead for us, not just for the United Methodist Church, but for the church more broadly, right?
Of
So,
course. Of course. I
um,
mean, this is not something we can do on our own, especially kind of in this current context. It's gonna take us all of us being willing to join together and be a little more vile.
right, exactly. Yeah. I really like the play on of vitality. I think it's really clever, and the book, I think, as you've already illustrated, is a good reminder for all of us that sometimes God will call us to do vile things and to live a particular kind of vile form of discipleship. And we need all groups of people in all different settings and contexts who will be willing to take on Wesley's words of engaging in vile activity, and even like Jesus, as you said earlier. So, well, thank you, Ashley, so much for joining us on the podcast. Again, the podcast is sponsored by San Diego United Methodist Church and the Garden Worship Service, which is a contemporary worship experience that just began a few months ago. And we invite you, if you're here locally in the San Diego area, to join us for the Garden. It's a safe, inclusive, affirming place where people can explore their faith and look at some of life's big questions. And we invite you also, if you're again in the San Diego area, to attend our traditional worship service at 9:30, and the garden is at 11. And you can also watch the 9:30 service through our live stream. And you can go online to the garden, encinitas.org. You can listen to this podcast through the Garden channel on YouTube. I'm getting all the lists in here. And you can also listen to it on Spotify. So if you like what you've heard, if you engage in this conversation, feel free to give us a thumbs up and or to drop us a note. We'd appreciate that very much. Again, thank you so much, Ashley, for being with us. We look forward to having others join us and have you join us as a part of the podcast in the future. Thanks you so much.
Thank you.